Hello, my name is Haikal Dipotara. What is an adjective clause? Okay, let's discuss about that. Adjective is a word that describes or modifies a noun in a sentence. Clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb. So, now we put those two meanings together and you got definition of adjective clause. Adjective clause is a group of words with a subject and verb that describe or modifies a noun or clause. Adjective clause, also called relative clause by some people. And here's some example. The man who was sitting in the corner. Tennis, which is my favorite sport. Food that many people eat daily. And all of these are describing the noun before them, and therefore they are considered adjective clauses. So in this video, we're going talking about adjective clause, relative pronoun, and difference between two types of adjective clause. Because if you're looking at this screen, you probably noticed already that there is difference, right? In this case, some of them have commas and some of them don't. Okay, let's discuss that. Defining adjective clauses. What are defining adjective clause? Well, what makes it defining? Because that is necessary. So, defining adjective clause is necessary information. It explains which person or thing that you are referring to. So, we need the information in order to understand clearly which person or thing we are talking about. And with a defining clause, and you don't use commas. Okay, let me give you an example. The girl who is wearing red shirt lives on my street. So in this case, who is wearing red shirt is an adjective clause, and it's modifying the word girl. It's explaining which girl I'm talking about. So I need this information in order to understand which girl I'm talking about. And that is nature of defining adjective clause. Without this information, I don't have enough understand which girl we're talking about. Now let's discuss the another adjective clause. Non-defining adjective clause is extra information. So we are adding extra information to a sentence, but it's not necessary to understand which person or thing we're referring to. And you have to put it between commas. If it's extra non-essential information, put it between commas. Okay, let me show you an example. London, which was the host of the 2012 Olympic, is visited by over 50 million people each year. So, in this case, I put commas because the adjective clause, which was the host of the 2012 Olympic, I don't need the information to understand London. So, we don't need that clause in order to understand London. So that's why we put commas and that's it. As simple as that. So you don't need information to understand which thing or person we're referring to. Also, we can remove the adjective clause and still know which person or thing we're talking about. The other type of adjective clause refer to whole sentence. They are sometimes called sensational relative clause. This type of adjective clause is always introduced with which. In writing, we usually put a comma before which. Okay, let me show you an example. But I think Sen was a bit upset about that. which is understandable. Which is understandable refer to whole clauses before it. Okay, another example. She goes to Canada and stay with her doctor, and then her doctor come here the next year. Every other year they change places, which is nice. Which is nice refer to whole scratch of the text before it. This is common in speaking but not in writing. Okay, I think that's all for adjective clause. If you still don't understand what is adjective clause, you need to understand what is relative pronoun, like who, which, whose, and whom. My friend will explaining about relative pronoun.
Guys, my name is Nurul Fitria. I will continue the explanation of Haikal Dipotara. Here I will discuss the material relative pronouns. Relative pronouns introduce relative clause. The most common relative pronouns are who, whom, whose, which, and that. The relative pronouns we use depends on what we are referring to and the type of relative clause. Who, people and sometimes pet animals, defining and non-defining. Which, animals and things, defining and non-defining. Clause referring to a whole sentence. That, people, animals and things, informal defining only. Whose, possessive meaning for people and animals, usually, sometimes for things, informal situation, defining and non-defining. Whom, people in formal style or in writing, often with a proposition, rarely conversation, used instead of who, if who is the object, defining and non-defining. In the example, the relative pronoun is in brackets to show where is it not and centered. The person or thing being referred to is underlined. We don't know the person who donated this money. We drove past my old school, which is celebration in 100th anniversary this year. He went to the school that my father went to. The parents whom are dead. We interview were all involved in education in some way. Relative pronouns who. We use who in relative clause to refer to people and sometimes to pet animals. We use it to introduce defining and non-defining relative clause. I think there be a lot of children would love to have a climbing while in school, defining. That's the dog who doesn't like me, defining, referring to avoid animals. There's this guy at work who's one of my friends. Well, he's never been our time, non-defining. Subject and object, who can act as the subject or the object of the relative clause. She's going out with a bloke who's in the army, who refers to a bloke and is the subject of is the relative clause. Bloke is an informal word for a man. The woman who I saw yesterday was Sheila, who refers to the woman and is the object of so in the relative clause. Who with collective groups of people we often use who with collective human nouns. Governments, group, panels, police, and teams. Example: Nicola found the fire brigade who then alert the police and social workers. We do not use say "whoa" for things. There are some very good are books which you can ideas from. Not, there are some very good are books who you can get ideas from. This is the explanation of the material for me, and it will be delivered by Edwin Gusando to him. Thank you so much.
Relative pronouns whom. For me, we use whom in formal styles or in writing to refer to people when the person is the object of the verb. It is much more common in writing than in speaking. The response of those managers whom I have consulted has been very positive, and we are looking forward to meeting together. Who refers to those managers and is the object of consulted in the relative clause. Whom plus prepositions. The most common use of one is with a preposition. We can ask whom as the complement of a preposition. The first book was a Timber historical novel for children which was turned down by every publisher to whom it was sent. Whom refers to every publisher and is the complement of the profession too. We put the preposition before whom. Compare. More formal and less formal. To more formal. There was only one person to whom the old man spoke, and to less formal, there was only one person who the old man spoke to. Relative pronoun was. We usually use was as a relative pronoun to indicate possession by people and animal. In more formal styles we can also use it for things. We use whose before nouns instead of a possessive expression. My, your, his, her, its, our, their, ex, in defining and non-defining clause. His marrying a girl whose family don't seem to like him. The family of the girl he's marrying don't seem to like him. Whose plus prepositions. We can use whose plus noun as the complement of a preposition. Kate, whose sister I used to share a house with, has gone to work in Australia. Whose sister refers to Kate and is the complement of with. We can put the preposition immediately before the relative pronoun, more formal written styles, or at the end of the relative clause, more informal. Compare more formal and more informal. Two more formal. Thomas Goldney in whose house and garden several generations of Bristol students have now lived, was described in the late 18th century as a very serious gentleman. Two more informal. Thomas Goldney whose house and garden several generations of Bristol students have now lived in, was described in the late 18th century as a very serious gentleman.
Okay, hello, my name is Septian Pratama. In this time, I will discuss about relative pronoun which and that. But firstly, we will describe about relative pronoun which. Let me begin the presentation. Relative pronoun which. We use which in relative clause to refer to animals and to the things. We use it to introduce defining and non-defining relative clauses. We always use which to introduce relative clauses when they refer to a whole sentence or clause. For example, you need to tick the box which say yes. It's defining. You won't have much time to prepare for the meeting, which is this afternoon. This is non-defining. She had to get up and walk all the way to the other side of the room, which isn't easy with a bad back, which refer to the whole sentence before it. We use which or that, not what. For example, another activity which or that I have chosen in photography. Another activity what I have choose is photography. If you use which or that, this is right. But if you use what, that false. Okay? Subject and object, which can act as the subject or the object of the relative clause. For example, the new sport complex, which will be built on the site of the old power station, will provide facilities for cricket, soccer, ball, and badminton, which refer to the new sport complex and its subject of will be built in the relative clause. Example number 2. It was the same picture which I saw at the National Gallery, which refer to the same picture and is the object of saw in the relative clause. Which plus preposition. We can use which as the complement of our prepositions. For example, early in the autumn term, there is a reception at which you can meet current staff and students, which refer to the receptions and its complement of a. Example number 2. Close by, in the churchyard, is the famous redstone stone, from which the village takes its name, which refers to the famous redstones and its complete of form. We can put the prepositions immediately before the relative pronoun, more formal, or at the end of relative clause, more informal. Example of more formal. The title of the poem indicates that the poet knows himself to be separate from the community in which he grew up. Example of more informal. I've never felt close to the community which I grew up in. Which referring to whole sentence. Relative clause referring to a whole sentence are always introduced by which. For example, There's going to be a new head teacher in September, which is good. It's time for a change. Talking about the play school for young children. Hey, it's lovely, clean there, and there are lots of toys that he can play with, and he's so happy. B. Which is more important? And now we will discuss about relative pronouns that. We use that instead of who, whom, or which in relative clauses to refer to people, animals, and things. We use it to introduce defining clauses only. That is more informal than who, whom, or which. For example, we met somebody last night that did the speech therapy course 2 years after you. This is refers to a person. Example number 2. The 8:30 is the train that you need to get. This is refers to a thing. She blamed herself for everything that had happened. Subject and object that can act as the subject or the object of the relative clauses. He finally remembers one lesson that his mom had taught him early. Don't take money that doesn't belong to you. This is refers to money and is the subject of belong in the relative clause. It is the same cooker that my mother has. This is refers to the same cooker and it's the object of has in the relative clause. That after superlative. We often use that after superlative. For example, the Wimbledon men's final was the best game of tennis that I've ever seen. That plus prepositions. That can refer to the complement of a preposition. For example, we've got some tennis balls that you can play with. This refers to some tennis balls and is the complement of the preposition with.
Thank you for watching our video and bye.